Okay, so I think we can get things started. People will join as they can, but we want to make sure we make the best use of time. So first I'll do like a quick overview of what to expect, kick off some introductions, and then we'll get just right into the panel. So thanks everyone for joining today. I'm Jacques. I graduated from HLS class of 2014. I'm joined here with Domonique. She'll introduce herself briefly. And I'm on the HLS New York Association board. And part of what we love to do is have interesting panels. So as you're thinking through this or you're going through this, if there are more topics like this you like to see, please let us know. I will drop both Domonique and my email address in the chat just in case there are any questions that come up. And then I think, today is it's not a large group, but we want to make it intimate and make it super helpful and interactive. So today we're going to kind of walk through some of the pivots that Domonique and I kind of went through, and also talk about some of the practices, whether it's mindful practice or, just trying to get grounded, that helped us make those pivots. And throughout each of the sections that we'll walk you through, we'll also have interactive questions for you. So feel free to either, if you have a piece of paper, you can write it down, or even just contemplate what we're talking about. We think it'll be super helpful, especially as we wrap up 2023, which I know was a up and down year for many of us, and go into 2024. I will also send the PDF or the link, so that to the extent you need to reflect on these questions later, or someone who might benefit from this information, you can send that, and just have it as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. We will be trying to monitor the chat, but just raise a hand or shout out if we don't get to it. This is meant to be both for, everyone's benefit. And so with that, I'll do a brief introduction. I am not going to talk a lot. I want Dom to talk, and I want us to kind of all get interactive in this. But I started my career at Skadden after graduating from HLS. I was in the M&A practice group. When I went to Skadden, I knew I did not want to be a partner or stay in corporate law for long. I quickly transitioned, not quickly, but soon thereafter, transitioned to my first startup. It was called the Players Tribune. It was started by Derek Jeter, and I did a business and legal kind of hybrid role. Then I started my own digital health company called Duos, and recently transitioned to an advisor role at that company to pursue what is now I think my soul's mission, which is coaching, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And with that, Dom, please feel free to introduce yourself and we'll kick things off.
Of course. Thank you, Jacques. So good to see so many familiar faces. Thank you all for being here. My name is Domonique Worship. I graduated HLS class of 2014 as well. And I started my career off at Cleary Gottlieb in their Latin America practice group, and later transitioned to the National Basketball Association, where I was senior associate counsel for their global partnerships group, and later the vice president of diversity and inclusion. And I'll go into a little more detail about each of those transitions a little bit later. But last May, I transitioned to operating my coaching and consulting practice full time, where I work with executives and rising leaders on a variety of aspects, thank you, Gina, of leadership development topics, all with the view towards supporting them to create aligned success in their lives and careers, and finding deeper fulfillment and meaning and purpose in their work. So we'll get into that more a little bit later, but great to see everybody.
Perfect. So where I want to start is kind of at the beginning, because I think all of us are at different points of our career. And could you just talk about how things started for you, so we can get a sense of your baseline, and that way you can serve as inspiration and expander for others, and just the work you did, and how you approach kind of starting off in your career.
For sure. So as I mentioned, I started off at Cleary Gottlieb in their Latin America practice group, focusing on M&A, capital markets, and some project finance. And I went in with a really clear game plan. So I had summered at Cleary, so I went in knowing exactly the type of work I wanted to do, exactly who I wanted to work with. And I was super intentional in my approach in terms of the type of work I took on, finding mentors and sponsors who I could lean into for guidance and support, just really carving out a very specific kind of career path there. And I looked for ways to create value and add value and create impact, even early on in my career, as many of us can relate. When you're junior, you often feel like you don't have much to offer. And so I really made it a point to seek out opportunities to add value wherever I could, even in really simple ways. And I think those two things in particular are two things that I've kind of carried with me throughout my career, just the ability to move with that level of intention, and also seeking out opportunities to create value wherever I can.
I love that. I mean, so it sounds like, if I can like boil all of that down, it sounds like what you went into Cleary, which for any role is probably applicable, is intentionality.
Yes, I think that's right. I got really, really clear on what I wanted that chapter of my career to look like, and what I needed to do in order to make that vision come to life. And so, in that spirit, we actually have our first reflection question for the audience here. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're still here.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So feel free to give these questions some thought now. And if you have answers that you'd like to share, feel free to throw them in the chat. And Jacques would love it if you could share your answers with us. But the first question is, what do you want this season of your life and career, personally, professionally, to mean?
Yeah. So I think for me, on a personal level, the intention I have for 2024 and like where I am right now is to re-architect my life. It may sound a little dramatic or aggressive, but I feel like up until really this year, I was living like a very conditioned kind of lifestyle. I was either just trying to make money so that I can like make a better life for myself. I was kind of opting into these things signal success, so let me go do those things. And I think where I am now personally, and also professionally, thankfully, is trying to get super clear on what do I want out of like life. I've done the thing. We went to the schools. We've got the job. We've done the thing. So I took this year to get super clear on like what does Jacques represent? Like, how do I want to show up? And then I look at, the end of this year and really next year as embodying that. And then professionally, with my coaching business, I use something called human design, which essentially creates a blueprint of your energy. And so I use this kind of blueprint when I coach people as a starting point. A lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm not sure what I want to do next. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if there was just something that can give you a hint? It won't give you the answers. Like, I think the answers come from within. But, in this professional season of my life, I really want to use these tools to help people that look like me and to just help others explore their highest self. So I feel like that was kind of a mouthful, but I don't know if others want to add, even if it's like 3 lines, like, I don't know, like freedom or something like that in the chat, because that might spark someone else to think through. Ooh, intentionality is amazing. Thanks, Hannah. That may spark other thoughts for people and thinking through what they want this season of their career and life to look like. Let's see any shares. Service to others, yes. Expansion. Oh, Crystal, I love that. Yeah, I think expansion is huge. And I think a lot of us, as we're thinking through pivots, just to piggyback off of Crystal's, is trying to find examples. Like, there's this woman I'm obsessed with, and she says one of the like components of making that leap and making that change is finding what she calls expanders. And expanders can be someone in your community. It could be a celebrity. It could be someone you don't know, but just someone who has what you're trying to get. And so you could just see that it's possible. And you may not find someone that has the exact background as you, but it's like, if you look at your current circle and no one in that circle is doing the thing that you want to do, that's fine. Just be aware of that, but then try to actively seek out people, even from afar, that have at least a piece of what you're trying to change or do, etc. Cool.
I love that. And Gina, absolutely second this focus on this season of your life and taking off the pressure to have everything figured out and just focusing on what's ahead of you. What do I want right now?
Yeah,
I love that.
And then the second question, love for everyone to think about, it's related, is I'll let it kind of load, which is, what impact do you want to create in your current role? So I think, the first question is all about you and what you want to see, but the second is really about what lives do you want to touch? What impact do you want to see? And so, Dom, I know I've been talking for a while. What about you? What impact do you want to create in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say really supporting people to do what you just described, Louise, to re-architect their lives, starting with what actually matters to them. I think many of us are so conditioned to be on this one prescribed path, right? And we have this idea that's sold to us implicitly and explicitly that there is one path to success. There's one right way to do things, particularly in the legal field. And so I really want to support people to step outside of that and get really clear on what matters to them personally and carve out a vision that's really rooted in the things that matter to them, and to find deeper fulfillment and alignment in their lives and careers, and be really intentional about finding opportunities to do things that feel meaningful and impactful based on their own personal definition of success, as opposed to the one that's kind of prescribed to us.
1,000,000%. Cool. Okay, so I'll keep us tracking, but we'll keep having questions like that. And thank you so much for sharing. I think it's helpful for all of us to see where we're at to get that, that inspiration. So Dom, it sounds like you're at Cleary, you're like setting these intentions, you're like, I'm doing all these things. And then all of a sudden, I'm sure something happens that caused you to leave. Like, what was that inflection point for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I had been working hard to arrive at this very specific place. And when I got there, I had to reckon with the fact that I was deeply unfulfilled. Like most big lot jobs, the hours were brutal, yes, but it was deeper than that for me. I was really craving deeper connection, deeper impact, an opportunity to be of service to others. And I just didn't feel that sort of connection to the work that I was doing at the firm. And so I started from square one. I leaned into my network, started reaching out to folks to get a sense of what else was out there, what other opportunities might be available to me. And I was fortunate enough to connect with a Harvard professor, actually, who challenged me to think about what I actually cared about, what actually mattered to me. And he posed a specific question to me that really kind of shifted the way that I was looking at things. He asked me to think back to a fulfilling day in my life and in my work. Specifically, he asked me to think about, what was I doing? Who was I with? What about that day felt so energizing and so fulfilling? And I didn't have this language for it at the time, but what I now recognize is that he was helping me to uncover what some of my core values were. And connection, service, and impact really came to the surface as three of my values. And so those became kind of my guiding light or my North Star as I started to think about what my next steps looked like. And at the time, a seed had kind of been planted about coaching, and I thought, maybe I could pursue that. But I was still relatively junior in my career, and that just didn't feel like a viable path for me at the time. So I parked that idea, but knew that I wanted to find opportunities to be of service, to have greater impact, to build more meaningful connections. And so I found my way to the MBA.
Nice. And so while you're at the MBA, like, were you able to pursue coaching on the side, or like, what was that turning point for you to decide to do coaching?
Yeah. So when I landed at the league, I had so many people reach out and share their stories with me. They shared that they felt stuck and unfulfilled. At the time, many of them were lawyers, many lawyers of color, lots of women reached out and just shared their personal stories. And I realized, if all these people are reaching out to me and asking for guidance and support with kind of figuring out their next step, maybe I do have something to offer here. And so for the first time, probably in my life, I took a leap with no clear destination in sight, and decided to get certified as a coach. And so I didn't really know what it would look like to leverage that certification, but I did feel confident that I was moving in the direction of my values, moving in the direction of my purpose. I knew that I was kind of getting warmer in terms of what I was supposed to be doing or meant to be doing. And so the certification program kind of forced me to really build a business. In order to get certified, you have to take on paying clients. You have to kind of, go through the motions. And so it evolved pretty organically for me that I arrived at this place of, doing this thing that I loved with any free time that I had, evenings, weekends, all of my free time was dedicated to building my coaching practice. And then I still had my day job. And so I was kind of balancing these two things and finding opportunities to bring my passion, my coaching work into my day job, which allowed me to show up more authentically. It allowed me to have more impact in the organization outside of what my legal work alone would have allowed. But that was kind of the dance that I was doing for some time. And that's how the side hustle came to be.
Excellent. And I feel like the side hustles usually start as a passion. And like, I think the first step is getting fulfilled, right? And so something we've done is recreate that question that this Harvard Law School professor posed to Domonique and will pose to you all, which is thinking about a day at work that felt fulfilling and energizing, and like, what were you doing and what were the values? And so for me, when I'm going to be honest, if I were to answer this question while I was still at the firm, I don't know what I would have come up with. And I try answering this in my own way. And what actually sparked the answer for me wasn't necessarily an experience that I owned. It was an experience that I read in a book. And so I think previously we talked about expansion, how just seeing like a person or a thing can kind of like give you that motivation or that inspiration to like what you want to do. And so I remember like Dom and I have been on very similar tracks. I went to like a yoga retreat. I was just like at the firm, couldn't figure it out. I felt stuck. And at this yoga retreat, I read this like very beautiful book, and it was based like in the like turn of the century. But this woman was essentially working at the BBC radio in the early days. And to me, that really felt like a startup. And I'm reading this book, and she's like rolling her sleeves up and figuring out problems. And I'm like, that feels energizing. That feels like what I want to do. And so like, did I base my next career jump on a novel I read on the beach? Yes. Does that sound crazy? Now that I say it out loud, what is the book? Oh man, it's called Radio Girls. Do not judge me. You just have to find motivation wherever you can. So the book on its face felt very like silly and a beach read. But when I was reading it and she was like, punching above her weight, I'm like, that's the kind of feeling I want. And one of my values was creativity. And as someone who's not like naturally creative, I wanted a job where I could creatively answer like problems and questions, and where I could just roll my sleeves up and figure it out without like having a predetermined path. So that really helped me figure out like, okay, it's time to leave Big Claw and find something in startups. Yeah. So if you guys want to think about what fulfills you at work, because that might also spark some interest or some thoughts for other people, please feel free to add it in the chat. Ooh, do you have coaching programs that you recommend? Okay, Don, we're getting some questions. Let me scroll up and make sure we haven't missed any.
I see. Okay. Coaching programs in terms of receiving coaching or becoming trained to be a coach, Jeanette?
Yes.
Becoming a coach. Yes. So I did CTI. It's the Coactive Training Institute. And I had a really, really good experience. I thought it was, again, I went into it not knowing exactly what I wanted to do with it, but CTI is kind of the oldest coaching institution. And so it doesn't force you into a particular type of coaching. So lots of people graduate from that program and go on to become life coaches or executive coaches or relationship coaches or really any type of coach. And I liked the flexibility of that. I will say, if you're looking to get into a specific type of coaching, there are so many programs now, even more than there were when I did this. So, it can funnel you into health coaching or whatever type of coaching you're looking for. So lots of different programs out there now, but CTI is the one that I did.
Nice.
IGC is another one that people seem to like a lot. I don't have personal experience with it, but I know people like it.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll keep. Perfect. And if you guys have any more questions, please put them in the chat. So you're Cleary. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask you to share a little bit more about how you kind of came up with your side hustle. How did you get into coaching?
Oh, yes. So I left Skadden, went to a startup, started getting more and more into like spiritual and wellness practices. I feel like in a past life, I might have been like, I don't know, some type of witch or something. Who knows? Probably should say that on a professional call, but I feel like it engenders vulnerability.
I love it.
So I started doing more stuff like this. And I ended up going to a company or starting a company with this like beautiful group of people. So I ended up having what on paper, I think similar to you, was like my dream job. I'm like working, I'm getting experience. I felt like in terms of like working for a company, it was the best role I could have had. But I started getting this itch that I'm like, this is a great, it was a good opportunity, but it didn't feel like a great like situation, but I wasn't sure what that great looked like. And then, life happens. I feel like the universe sometimes pushes you to where you need to be at the right time. And so last year, my mom got really, really sick. She has cancer. I had to move back home to St. Louis area where I'm from for like half the year. And by this time last year, I was like a husk of myself. I'll never forget. They always talk about like these rock bottom moments where it could be you lost your job, you lost a spouse, or like whatever happens to you, but you're like crying on the floor. And those are the moments where you kind of like almost like a phoenix moment where you're like so low that you kind of come out of it. And so I'll never forget, like my partner found me like sobbing at like 6 a.m. on my Peloton. And I was like, okay, like something has to change. And I had discovered human design like a few months before. And I think similar to you, it was a kernel. And in human design, they talk about the different like types, and all the different types have certain characteristics. And what I am is called a projector, and projectors love to learn about themselves and others. And so I just was like a nerd and like going down rabbit holes. And I found that this became this became something I was naturally interested in and curious about outside of work. And when I was going through such a traumatic time with my mom in and out of the hospital, it became like a refuge. I'm like, I can learn about myself, I can learn about other people, and it's helpful to the collective. And I love that it wasn't connected to my daily job. And so I went and got readings, because that's kind of like how a lot of people start. You can get a reading from a guide. And these were people who had been doing it for like 10 years. And honestly, I went to both. I had a great time, but I was like, I could do this. And in some ways I can do it better. And I'm not trying to like, make myself appear better, but I was like, the way in which they were giving the session, I knew that there were people, honestly, like us, who were like very professional, who wanted this information in a much more practical way than in many ways in how it's presented. So similar to you, Dom, I use nights and weekends to get certified, to start getting clients. And it just went from something that I'm like, oh, I'll do it on the weekends. Oh, it became like we can meet in a coffee shop and talk about it. And Dom and I we would like meet in Harlem at coffee shops and work on our side hustle. So if you have a friend that's nearby that's like thinking of an idea, try to find that person, because it can also keep you very accountable.
Absolutely. It's such a good point. 100% co-sign on that. You were my rock during that time.
Yes. Yes. And so I guess I'll put it back to you. So at this point, you're coaching on the side. And I think a lot of people have this question, which is, how do you know when to stop your very like stable job and do something that is terrifying? Because people try to like romanticize entrepreneurship, and it is great, but it is also very scary. So would love for you to talk a little bit more about like that thought process as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I describe it as what started off as a whisper turned into a scream that I could no longer ignore. Like it truly felt like I didn't have a choice. I had just been, doing both things for some time. And then 2020 happened and the world turned upside down. And so the work took on a new sense of urgency for me. And so that was part of the impetus. I transitioned into, so as I was 2020 happened and I was like, okay, it's time to focus on this work full time. And then an opportunity became available at the NBA to lead their internal diversity and inclusion strategy. And that felt really aligned. It didn't feel like what I had anticipated shifting into, but it felt like an opportunity again to create impact in something that felt personally meaningful to me. And so I pivoted out of the law and into that, all the while kind of still juggling my coaching business on the side. And after some time, for a number of reasons, it just became clear that I would be able to have a bigger impact from outside of the organization than I could from within it. And that also coincided with the first time since I'd started the business that I really felt confident that I was ready. I really just felt like, I got this. I can do this. I've had clients. I have experience. All of my professional experience, kind of my day job experience up to date had been really, really supportive. And I just felt like I was ready. And so, of course, there were practical considerations as well. So financial considerations were probably the biggest. That was a really...
about it. I just want to interrupt with a brief question, because I feel like too many of us don't talk about numbers. Would you be open to share like financially what you needed as like to make you feel good, which is different for everybody, but I just want to normalize talking about numbers and specifics.
For sure. Yeah, happy to. So I had, at the time that I transitioned, I had 6 months of savings, just like liquid in an account that was readily accessible. I knew that I'd be able to access it with no problem if I needed to. And so that kind of gave me the security that I needed to feel like I could take that leap, just knowing that I had that to fall back on. And I think just being honest, thinking through the worst case scenario, I thought, all right, let's say I take this leap and I fall flat on my face. It doesn't work out. I'm not able to do it. Then what? I knew that I would always be able to find another role, whether it was a legal role or another role in D&I or another role in the leadership development space. I just knew that kind of going back to the corporate world was something that would be available. And so I just took that and kind of ran with it. And I also, the third thing I think that was really helpful was getting really clear and really granular about what I wanted my life to look like, what I wanted my days to look like, who I wanted to work with, the type of work I wanted to do. I got really into kind of journaling and visualizing and being really specific about what I wanted to do, and then creating an action plan to bring that vision to life, like super, super tactical. And so I think having that vision created a coach of mine actually shared with me. He said, forget about courage. Everyone wants to talk about courage and the courage that you need to make these transitions. He said, forget about that. What are you committed to? What's the thing that's bigger than you that you are committed to achieving, to bringing to life? And that was what got me through. I thought about the people I was committed to. I thought about my vision for the business that I wanted to build. And my commitment to that was bigger than my fear of failing. And so kind of all of those things are what gave me the courage and confidence to take the leap.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like I had a similar experience. And I think something you said was the whisper becomes a scream.
Yes.
And that scream sometimes could just be telling you to leave or to get out of a situation. And I felt the same. I launched my business earlier this year, and I'm like, okay, I'll work a year and a half in my company. I'm going to save up all of this money and I'm going to learn these different skills. I had this whole action plan. 1 month goes by. Now I'm like, okay, end of the year, here we come. Another month goes by, and I'm like, oh, okay. So if I could just leave in 3 weeks. But I think to you, it was because as I was getting more and more deep into what I felt passionate about, you're right, the commitment layer really starts becoming a thing, because when it's hard to make that leap. And I also wanted 6 months of savings in an account. And my 6 months was 6 months I didn't mind losing. Some people often say 6 months of savings, which, everyone can think about it differently, but like security and safety is like a core room for me. And I am just unable. Like, I want to be very, very courageous, but like up until like a point when it comes financially, just being open. And so it was like 6 months of cash that felt like that I could just not lose, but I could just spend, and it wouldn't make me feel like extremely uncomfortable, although it does make you feel very, very scary in the inside. And then I think for you, we're already talking about the 3 things that really, really like helped us. And I think that's also like a question. So we can pause it to the audience so you guys can also marinate and kind of give some examples. And we're talking about, we call it leap planning. So if you're thinking about making a leap, and that's either leaving your job or you're trying to build a side hustle or even make the leap to leave your current job, it's like, what has to be true, right? And so for me, I think similar to Domonique, it was like a financial component, which is savings. Another thing that really helped me was lowering my expenses. So like we moved apartments. I got printouts of our like credit card bills and went through and saw like, what can I eliminate? What's a nice to have? Like redid a budget. I refinanced my loans. You can give yourself, like, if you're doing a service-based business like coaching or something like that, you can give yourself like I'll have 1 client or I'll have 2 clients, and then I'll know I can leave, to, pretty much give you some type of heuristic of when these things are in place, I'll feel comfortable. But with that said, be open to it looking a little different, because something else can come into the mix. Like you may get a bigger client, or you may not be able to move, but you still feel like this dream you have in your heart wants to be realized. And like, what happens then? So let me just check the chat. I saw some.
I see some good questions.
I do. So one question is, so many organizations have gone through so much transition over the years. How has that shown up in your coaching practices? If so, how? Have you seen that, Dom?
I have. I mean, I think in particular, the Great Resignation and what unfolded in 2020 shifted the way that organizations think about retaining diverse talent in particular. And so I think I've seen an openness that wasn't present in the same way to really investing in employees as individuals and not just thinking about them as, people who are kind of creating value for the company. And so a lot of my work is really grounded in holistic well-being. It's leadership development, but it's holistic leadership development, right? How do we create an environment where you're set up for success and where you feel empowered to bring all of you to work and all of the things that make you so exceptional and all of your gifts and talents and perspectives and experiences, and bring all that to bear in your day-to-day work. And so that's probably the biggest shift I've seen is an openness to that sort of approach as opposed to a singular focus on hard skills, right? So things like communication, executive presence, these things, of course, are still very important. But I think that there is an openness and a willingness now to think about that in a more holistic way that has resulted from, the Great Resignation and all of the happenings of the world that have kind of evolved since 2020.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I think for me, it's not the right word, how to put this. It's almost like a lot of the folks who seek me out for coaching, it's kind of two buckets. The first bucket is the individual bucket. And these are people who are seeing the transitions happening. Either they're directly affected and impacted or have gotten terminated, or they've seen like entire departments at their companies get restructured. And I think a lot of us, especially in this like middle of our careers at a big inflection point, are starting to take a step back and think through, okay, if this company could get rid of me today, and not to demonize corporations, it just is what it is. It's a fact of doing business. If that is true, like, where do I want to use my energy and effort, knowing that if I'm going to stay working for a company, it's quite possible that that job that used to be promised and lucrative may not be here tomorrow. And like, what does that mean? And so I think a lot of people kind of have seen what's happening in the market and kind of internalize that and use that as motivation to get super clear on what they want to do, so that irrespective of what happens in the market, they're prepared. On the corporate side of the house, I think because there have been so many transitions, I've now been talking to HR and especially D&I leaders who are looking for tools like coaching and human design for their existing employees, because they're like, we don't want to lose more people. There's quiet quitting. Like, as much as we see it going in like the termination, like spectrum, there's also this sense of like, it is hard to find top talent now. And so if you're a company and you want to be competitive, like, what are you doing for your employees and how are you supporting people in a very holistic way? So that's how we've seen it. And then we have one more question, but I'm going to kick us to Gain Resource, and then we can go back to the second question, Dom.
In the chat. Okay. Yeah, I see two in the chat. One from Gina and one from Fatima.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So one question we want to pose to you all, which is, we're always like, Dom and I are always talking very like practical brass tacks, like what you need to have in place to do this thing. But something I feel like that does not get discussed enough, which is you can have the money in the bank, you can do all these things, but how are you getting grounded so that you can try to get clarity on what that next step looks like? Because I think, Dom, you said this really clearly, which is I got super clear on what I wanted my life to look like. And I think in today's society, when you're going from like kids to the job to the next thing, it's hard to, really untangle, are the things that I say I want because I want them or because society has told me I want them? And often the only way to figure that out is to get quiet and get grounded. So thanks, Lauren. To the extent, people don't have a consistent practice of getting grounded in clarity, I would, really challenge everyone on this call to start thinking through, like, what in this next year can I implement? And what's something that I committed to just experimenting with, just trying it out for the next 2 weeks. And we have some examples here, but Don would love to hear like what gets you grounded so that you can get clear on next steps.
For sure. There's a few things and things that I leaned into a lot while I was navigating that transition. The first is a practice called morning pages. So every morning, first thing in the morning, I would light a candle. I would go on Spotify and find some sounds of the ocean, some calming waves, and set a timer for 20 minutes and just do stream of consciousness journaling. So whatever came to mind, I would just put it out on the paper. And it was a really clarifying way for me to start my day. It allowed me to feel grounded. It allowed me to create space for the fears and doubts and worries that I had, especially as I was navigating that transition, and really kind of clear the clutter in my mind. I really found it to be a transformative practice that I committed to in a different way when I was navigating this transition, because it was something that really I found to be incredibly supportive. And it allowed me to, like you said, Jacques, kind of clear space for that vision, right? What do I actually want? I was able to get out the things that I don't want and the worst case scenarios and really focus in my waking time on the things that I did want. And that's what allowed me to kind of create that vision. So that was one thing. Movement was another, just every single day, making sure I was taking walks, being in the gym every morning. I really had like a solid routine that grounded me. And then the third piece was having a coach of my own. So I am obviously biased, but I really do believe in the power of coaching. And when you're in the thick of things, it's hard to see things clearly sometimes, right? Those voices, the voices of self-limiting beliefs, the doubts all come up loud and clear in those moments of transition. And so having someone who did with me what I do with my clients, so a blend of that kind of inner work, that mindset work, as well as the highly tactical strategic action planning, was really, really supportive for me. So those three things I would say.
I love that.
What about you?
I mean, mine are very similar but different. I think this is why it's helpful to kind of tease it out. I also love morning pages and meditation, but mine is different. Where yours is more free writing, I need more structure in the morning or I won't be able to commit to the practice. So every day for my morning pages, I do like, it sounds cheesy, but like we are where we are. It's 3 things that I'm grateful for to like have that mindset. 3 things that I'm like asking for, or I want to go well in the day. Then I have a section that I recently created called like strong emotions. And so that is where I write down like, am I feeling super happy now? Why? Like, am I feeling down now? Why? Or like to your point down, like the worst case scenario, I found that if I can write down what the worst case scenario is, it kind of takes some of the fear and anxiety out of it. So I'll use that section. And then the last one is called my Kobe section. So I put Kobe : because Kobe has this sense of like, he's like, greatness is basically doing one thing every day, like trying to get better every day. And so I end my journaling with, what's the one thing that I did yesterday that moved the ball forward generally? And it doesn't have to be like in my job or, it could just be something I did that like advanced Jacques. It's often professional because, that's just how our minds are wired, but it doesn't have to be. And I found that super helpful along with like just taking walks outside. My partner used to always tell me to do that during COVID. I was like, I'm not doing it. But now I am like, I have a fanny pack and I go walking with my fanny pack. Okay.
I love it.
So we have a question. So Fatima, apologies if I mispronounced that, says, how much of your time would you say is spent on running the business versus actual coaching? That is a great question.
Very good question.
Yeah.
I'll start. I mean, it's not what you would think. So I think when I transitioned to doing this work full time, I thought 95% of my time would be spent doing the work I love and coaching. And that's just not the case. I'd say maybe closer to 25% is actually coaching and facilitating. The rest is a lot. And the lion's share of my time is spent doing various marketing activities. So social media, newsletters, blogs, like creating all of that content takes a lot of time. I don't think that's something that's one of my natural gifts. So it takes me an inordinate amount of time probably. But a lot of the time is spent doing that. Business development. So cultivating new relationships with organizations, with individuals that hopefully will convert into clients, finding ways to add value. And so the admin things, in addition, take up a lot of time. I do have some support with that. And so that's been helpful. But I'd say about 75% of my time is spent doing things that are not coaching or kind of facilitating. And 25% is probably coaching.
I would agree. We wish it was more. And, something I'm eager to see is like in 2 or 3 years, what will that percentage be? But I feel like I went through scaling one company and going from 0 to 1 in another. And it just never ceases to amaze me, like how much time it takes to just build the fundamentals. Like getting your website up can take a month. You're going back and forth. Oh yeah, the time ratio changes over time. Yeah, the getting your website up, doing social media, feeding the beast, even if you're doing minimal social media, doing content, like the first couple stages of just creating the foundation you need to run a business takes an inordinate amount of time. And I think, as you have a bigger team, less of that is going to be spent. But the initial days, like if you're doing a coaching or wellness business or anything service-based, in those first couple of years, people are buying you. So like you and your voice and your face and all of that have to be like front and center. And to Dom's point, a lot of it is not doing the coaching. It's like it's like making the sausage of the business. Crystal Fox has raised a hand.
Hello, you amazing human beings. Piggybacking on that question, does it feel different, despite the fact that you're not spending the vast majority of your time doing the thing that brings you light and joy? Does the rest of the administrative work feel different than it did before?
Yes.
Great question.
Yes. I don't know about you, Dom, but that's a great question, Crystal. I feel like even though I'm not doing as much of the like interpersonal work, I have more space in my days. I have more autonomy over what I want to do. And as someone who, I don't know, it's weird. As a child, I was very creative. As a young adult, no creativity. Like I didn't think of myself as creative. And now I'm like swinging back to doing creativity and like thinking of myself as a creative. And the idea of building and creating to me is like very, very rewarding. So it doesn't feel like just I have to get this work done that I used to feel like a company. Dom, would you say something similar?
100%, yes. It feels so different. I think, in particular, one of the things that I thought would be true of owning my own business is having better hours, having a more manageable schedule, and that just really hasn't been the case, to be honest. There's still, it's a one-woman show, and so there's still so much time and energy that I'm having to personally pour into the business at this stage, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It truly feels so energizing and so fulfilling and so meaningful, and everything that I do, I can see its connection to something bigger. And that sense of purpose and that kind of bigger picture vision really makes it feel wildly different than it did when I was in a corporate environment where I was, taking direction from someone else or often maybe working towards initiatives that weren't aligned with what I wanted to do necessarily. And so it feels really, really different. Great question, Crystal.
This is a good segue to just talking about present day. We really wanted to, I'm not going to forget your question. I think it was Jasmine. We're going to come back to that one. But just giving everyone a peek under the hood of like what our day-to-day looks like, what we're working on, how we're thinking about our business. Because I know when I was trying to figure out my next steps, I just didn't have enough examples of like, what does it look like? So Dom, if you could just talk about like your current business, how it's structured, what you're offering and some of your focus and any type of peeks under the hood and some secret sauce that you wouldn't mind sharing with the group.
Sure, happy to. So there are kind of two pillars of the business, the individual side and the corporate side. On the individual side, I offer one-on-one coaching to individuals who are looking for deeper fulfillment and alignment in their lives and careers, looking to really hone their leadership skills, as I mentioned before, carve out their own definition of success and looking for some support and accountability on their way to really bringing that vision to life. So that's one kind of container. It's one-on-one coaching in the form of 90-minute intensives or longer-term engagements. I also recently launched a digital course that I'm really proud of. So I've been looking for ways to create more impact on the individual side of the business. And so I'm really excited now to have an offering that's a self-guided experience. And so it's taking so many of the tools and techniques that I use in kind of in-person one-on-one coaching and putting it in more of a digital container. So it's more accessible. People can do it on their own schedule. And that's called Unlock Your Vision, that launched recently. The third kind of pillar right now on the individual side is a free community that I recently launched for high achieving women who are looking for something bigger. So I, started it with people like Jacques and I in mind, people who were really looking for deeper alignment, fulfillment, and purpose, and looking to kind of step off the beaten path. And that road can be really daunting and really lonely and really scary. And so I created a space specifically for women who are looking for that, who can lean into each other for guidance and support and encouragement. And so that launched recently. It's called Exceptionally Aligned. And then on the organization side of the business, I offer a variety of coaching, training, consulting services. So one-on-one coaching, again, for executives and rising leaders to support them with various aspects of leadership development, but still with that holistic view. So helping them carve out their own definition of success. I call it aligned success. So what does success look like for you? How can we create opportunities for you to really honor your values through your work and really being intentional and thoughtful about how you're mapping out your career? And then I also do group workshops and really actionable, engaging workshops on a wide variety of topics. So often organizations will come to me and say, hey, we want to create some programming around X thing, and I can kind of customize something for them. So I'll stop there. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but those are the pillars of the business right now. And in terms of the day-to-day, I try to bring some kind of structure to my week by only holding sessions on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and then reserving Mondays and Fridays for admin things, for content creation, for business development. And so, of course, there's some spillover. I am pretty strict about only holding sessions Tuesday through Thursday. The admin and marketing and other things kind of spill onto the other days, but that at least helps me to have some structure to my week, and to, every morning I wake up and I shouldn't say every morning. The mornings when I'm doing it right, I wake up and I time block my day. And so in 30-minute increments, I get really clear on what exactly I want to do. And I'm just super intentional about how I spend my time on the day-to-day.
And how did you know? Like, I think a lot of people are usually like, how do you even get started? So how did you know to like do a course, or like maybe just pick one of them? Like, how did you even know to start to even do that thing?
Yeah, in terms of my offerings.
Mm-hmm. Like if you're like a coach, or like starting a new business, even like, how do you know where to like put your efforts first?
Yeah, good question. So I started where I saw the most need. And so with the community, for example, I thought about, what I needed when I was navigating that transition, and I couldn't find it. And so I decided to create it. And with the self-guided course, I'm thinking about people who I've encountered who aren't ready to invest in long-term coaching, or maybe aren't financially able to invest in long-term coaching, but still want that support. I saw a need and an opportunity to really meet that need, and support folks in that way. And so each of my offerings has really evolved organically in that way. And I found it to be, what kind of creating things with someone specific in mind has been my approach to date, and it's worked so far. So we'll see.
And I'll this is our last question. So I'll give my answer just so you guys have a sense, and then we'll open it up for questions. I couldn't find it, so I created it for sure. I think similar to Domonique, and you'll see with many coaches, I have a similar structure in terms of like the individual work, the corporate work, as well as like group workshops. The individual work for me is just similar. You can either work like over time or do like these deep intensives. And I think honestly, that's based off of whether or not the person has the time, and honestly, the financial resources to make that type of investment. And I think both Dom and I probably feel that we want to make our work as accessible as possible. For me, I started doing one-on-one work for just much more tactical reasons. It was just easier. When you're starting businesses, you think about, and this is where I love human design. Human design talks about like where your sweet spot is within business. So for me, I have something in my profile, which means I get a lot of my opportunities from my network. So I just started telling people what I was doing, and then people were like, oh, that sounds great. I want to learn more. Domonique, on the other hand, has something where like people like come from far and wide, and they want to like understand what she's up to. So creating platforms can be much more transformative for her business. And so I started the 101s, and then I am recently pivoting to more corporations work, because when you're doing certain types of service work, you want to think about the scalability of yourself. And so whether or not that's doing digital courses where it's one-to-many, or you're scaling up and going straight to businesses, you want to think about like, at some point, I'm going to cap out in terms of the hours I can spend in this business, and like, how can I continue making money and like growing my business without having to be like one-on-one all the time. So the one-to-many is always great. And then doing group workshops. Like for me, I love doing group workshops because it brings together a lot of people. It creates like a little mini community. And I'm able to do really interesting collaborations with like yoga studios. I have like one coming up next year with like a sneaker studio here. They do like customized sneakers. And so I was talking to the owner of the workshop, and we're gonna do like a whole session where you learn about human design, and you like customize a sweatshirt. So then you have this like talisman of like your authenticity that you can wear out. So those are like where I can find little fun pieces in the business. Taking a peek under the day, I think similar to Dom, a lot of it is that admin, is that marketing, is that content, is just like getting business through the pipes. But something I've been trying to do is like find fun in my job. So that can look different for a lot of people. But if you have like a very high stress, or like you're always working, is there something you can do related or unrelated to your work that's fun, or like at least a nice to have? So like I felt that way about pro bono work at the law firm. I think to Dom's point, I'm like creating an experience next year because I felt like it would be a good idea and no one else was doing it. A lot of people always give you or a really good like rule of thumb is what's something that you can do that you have a vision for that's going to be like a light lift for you, but doesn't currently exist. Like, how can you put your own spin on something? And that can kind of give you an inclination that you might have been put on this earth to do that thing because you see how to do it and no one else is doing it, or at least doing it in the way that you are doing it. So that's just like a little piece about what I've been up to, but I want to make sure we leave room for questions. So I'm going to drop in the chat as well. Domonique and I, here are our emails. If you want to stay in touch, you may like a little form if you want to like follow along and stuff like that. But I feel like I usually go to these panels and the panelists are like, yeah, reach out to me anytime for questions, but you never get their contact info. So send us an email there, and I will also link the reflection guide that we ran through just in case that's not coming up. There you go. And then, the last question or the last thing I'll leave you guys with, and then we'll do questions, is this one. I'm like, there you go. We've talked about our intentions. We've talked about the impact. We've talked about practices that either ground you. We've talked about planning in terms of what you need to make that leap. But we also want to make this very actionable and give everyone homework. So maybe not on this call, but like sometime today, just think through, is there something you can commit to? At least one thing you will start, and it could be simple. It could be, I will move my body, 3 times a week. I will actually go find that practice that grounds me. One thing you will stop. And so maybe it's, I will quit my job. I don't know, like, the world is your oyster. And then the third one is like, what's one thing you will continue or double down on in the next 30 days? So if you found something that's made you happy and you're starting to research it, maybe you continue researching that topic that's bringing you joy. And so with that, we will turn it to questions. Dom, I know one question. Oh, you saw it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can either of you expound on, this person was recently restructured and let go from the NBA. Any advice on how to pivot after being laid off?
Yes, absolutely. Jasmine, I'm so sorry to hear that, and separately would love to connect with you. Let's plan to hop on a call sometime soon. But I would say the first thing is getting really clear on what you actually want. I heard a quote from Oprah the other day, and she said, successful people are successful because they know what they want, simply. So just getting really, really clear on what that thing is for you. What do you want this next chapter of your life and career to look like? I know you mentioned you're also a new mom. Congratulations. And so I would say starting off by getting really, really clear on that and giving yourself the time and space to really envision what that looks like, right? Kind of think big. If you could do anything in the world, what would that thing be? And start from that place of infinite possibility that we sometimes don't allow ourselves to access, right? Out of fear, for a number of reasons. But that would be my first piece of advice, is just to get really clear on what that vision is for yourself. And then from there, you can reverse engineer the dream and begin to map out a plan to get you from where you are to where you want to go.
Yep. And then you all feel free to shout out any questions, but I know one I had that came up right before this was someone was asking, they are in a current job, they are like middle, like, senior-ish in their career, but they want to make a pivot, but they want to go to a different industry, but they don't know how. So how do you make a pivot to something that you potentially don't have any type of experience in? And so something I recommended for that person was similar, which is get clear on what that next pivot looks like. And to your point, reverse engineer it. But to make it more practical, and I would love to hear your thoughts, Dom, on this, is, if you are able, when you can do things for free for other people, all types of doors will open. And I get it. Not everyone has the time or even the finances to do stuff for free. But the quickest way to yes is when the person doesn't have to do any work. So if you are a coach and you want to like start coaching or like get experience, offer sessions for free. People will never say no. If you're selling candles, if you're trying to be a marketing or content creator, just start doing it for free if you can. I mean, obviously, I'm never saying you should devalue yourself and like, not get paid for your work. But if you're working in a job And I get it. It's like you want me to have experience, but I don't have an experience. How can you quickly start getting some yeses? And that way you have experience. And then that way, when you go to the place that's like you need experience, you're like, oh, well, I've worked with these 5 people, or I've done these 5 things. They don't need to know it was for free. People don't need to know, that may be like a super tactical thing, but you don't have to share that information. Think of it as an internship, 100%. An internship that you might do at 40, which is fine, but it at least gives you like a portfolio or a resume of that work. So Don would love to hear that.
Yeah, I love that. I second that. I would say, in addition, being really intentional about building your network in the space that you want to transition to. So who you know matters as much, if not more, than what you know. And so be really, really intentional about making connections in that industry, learning about how they got there, right? What are some of the skills and experiences and tools in their toolkit that have allowed them to create success in that space? And think about then how you can get some of those tools and experiences and exposure to those things. The second thing I would say is don't be shy about sharing what you want to transition into. So this is one of the mistakes I made when I was transitioning into coaching. I was really shy about it. I shared with like my close friends, but I did not, I didn't put it on social media. I didn't share widely what I was doing because I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't sure yet what that looked like. And when I did start to share with people, all sorts of doors started to open. People started referring people to me. I had opportunities. A lot of the clients I took on early on were at a really, really low rate, and that's okay. It gave me the experience I needed to really kind of get my sea legs and get my feet wet. And so I would say, be loud and proud about what you're trying to do, and don't be shy about sharing with people in your network what it is that you're up to and letting them know how they can support you. Because people are often really, really eager to support if you let them know how they can.
I co-sign that. I always tell people in my practice, stop hiding. If your business is plateauing and you're not getting the opportunities that you want, and you're in the space you want to be, take some time and get super clear and be honest with yourself and be like, where in my life could I potentially be hiding? Because a lot of us are like, we're high performers. We've always done well at school and at work. We're going to do the work, put our head down, and we'll get rewarded. But sometimes we are hiding. And so if you can figure out where you're hiding, and to your point, start telling people, that can be a way to unlock your success as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we're at time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Oh, thanks everyone for this. Hopefully you have the links to the reflection guide. You have our emails if anything else comes up. And also we really want to make this a series. So if you are in the wellness space and you want to do a chat like this, please email me. If you know other people in your networks who fit that profile, let me know. And if there are different topics like this that you're like, I wish we could have talked more about X, let me know, because ideally we would do this on some recurring basis, maybe quarterly or more frequent if it's interest, but want to make sure that it reflects what the community needs. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Great day. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.